1. After trying for nearly 10 years to conceive a child, my husband and I decided to try a very dramatic alternative. We were going to find a donor and use the old-fashioned way of conceiving. We decided to ask a co-worker of his to do this for us, because this man had great work ethic, great morals, was intelligent and funny. He also happened to be of Native American descent. My husband and I are not, so we knew going into this it might be a little awkward with our families, should this crazy plan work. 12 months later, our first son was born, a true miracle for us. And sure enough, he did not hide his native heritage at all, with his bronze skin and jet black hair. It was a little weird with the extended families for a while, but they were just thrilled we finally had our miracle baby. I believe our son was about 6 months old at the time of this event, because we did not put him down for the first 6 months. He literally slept in our arms. By 6 months old, he was beginning to sleep through most of the night, so reluctantly we started putting him in his crib to sleep. He would be fed, changed, and laid in his crib, with the mobile on, and always sleeping before the mobile was done with its musical cycle. One morning I awoke to the sounds of my baby ready for his diaper change and bottle, so, as I had done for a while now, I got out of bed, took my son from his crib, put the bottle in the warmer, changed his diaper, retrieved the bottle, and sat down to begin feeding him. I would say it took about 5 minutes from taking him from his crib to sitting down for the bottle. Anyway, I was sitting there feeding him when all of a sudden, the mobile started playing in the other room. I looked towards the open door of the room and could see it spinning in its circle as it played the music. No one else was home. I was there alone with my baby, so no one could have turned it on. Now, there have been times when the mobile continued to play very weakly, for another full turn after its cycle had ended. But that was always immediately after the cycle ended, and never lasted more than a full turn. This was different. It had been more than 6 hours since the mobile was wound and played. It was not playing when I woke up, got my child, made the bottle, or changed his diaper. No one was in the house to turn it on, and I did not own any animals that could have bumped or jarred it to play. Plus it was playing with full music on a full cycle. I was freaking out, to say the least. I knew there was no bad guy in the house to defend myself against, so I sat there feeding my son and watching the mobile, wondering what the hell I should do. After a couple minutes, the mobile had run its cycle and stopped. I was still sitting, half frozen and freaking out, but once it stopped, I felt a sudden anger wash over me. I said out loud to no one in particular, "I don't mind sharing with ghosts, but if I ever see shit flying around, or you do anything to hurt or scare my son, I will get a priest of every worldly denomination in here and exorcise your ass back to where you came from." Thankfully, it never happened again. I should also note that when I would feed my son, many times he would look right past me as if I wasn't there. At some point on the wall behind us, he would coo and smile and wiggle as if something was behind me, entertaining him while he ate. This never bothered me, as I never saw or felt any presence, and being a new mom, I wasn't entirely sure what was normal and what wasn't. I would just laugh it off as one of his native angels watching over him. You know those stories of native ghosts and stuff, so yeah, I dismissed it to that. This is why when the event with the mobile happened, I spoke out as if to a ghost. Before seeing this show, a ghost was the only explanation I could come up with, which never really made much sense to me, as I don't exactly believe in ghosts or spirits or hauntings and such. I'm not sure how I feel about the Matrix idea or multi-dimensions, but to me that's slightly more reasonable than ghosts. 2. My husband and I were living in the first house we bought. By this time we had a second son. That had come completely natural for us. On the first try, no less. That alone is a story, considering how our first son had come to be. Anyway, we had been there for about 2 to 3 months, and we were settled into a new place. One night we had taken our kids over to my parents' house so we could have a couple's night to ourselves, which was much needed after the big move and rather sudden explosion in the size of our family. It was a relaxing, uneventful evening with a nice dinner, a luring movie, and much needed adult time. At about 11 p.m. we went to bed. We were in bed for about 15 minutes, so we were both at the mostly asleep stage, where you're half awake and half asleep. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the bed started bouncing. Not mildly shaking, but actually bouncing, as if one of our kids was jumping on it. I could feel my whole body move and my arms bounce up and down on the bed. Scared as fuck, I sat straight up in bed, eyes wide, open and fully prepared to fight whatever or whoever was on my bed. Nothing was there. As I sat bewildered, my husband said, "You felt that too?" That's when I really freaked out. It wasn't just my imagination. Once again, I put this up as a ghost thing attributed to my native child. Had a little talk with the ghost and went about life. But the ghost idea never did make sense. I mean, why would a ghost jump on a bed to wake you up and nothing else? For what purpose? But at the time I had no other ideas, so I left it at that. Then I saw a show on glitches and immediately remembered this event. A glitch seems far more likely than a ghost. 3. A bit of backstory that is important. Where I live, my family and I can easily visit family in a neighboring country. We do every 3 to 4 years. This story takes place while we were visiting them 1 year. It is also important for me to say that the guy in this story, I will call him John, he isn't immediate family, he is step-family, but not close at all. At the time I was 12 years old and my sister 14. The family we visited has a big house, so naturally, we stayed over at the house. It was our last night there, and there was a lot of people staying there as well. So my sister and I, being the youngest, had to sleep in the living room. This is where John comes in. He was also visiting, and he was about 20 years old, so he also had to sleep in the living room that night. My sister and my bed were next to each other, and John was farther away with his mattress, turned to sleep another direction. So we went to bed, and something woke me from my sleep. As I tried to figure out what woke me, I felt something on the inside of my thigh. I then realized it is moving up my leg. I look down at my legs and see John at my feet, and it is his hand on the inside of my thigh. I tried to move, but he didn't let me. I then woke up my sister, and she realized what he was doing. Then when he saw both of us looking at him, he removed his hand. I still can't remember if he gave an explanation or an apology, but he did move back to his bed and left us alone. I really think we didn't assess the situation correctly, because we didn't tell our parents the next morning, we just stayed quiet. I think we thought that we were leaving and we won't see him for a few years, so it will be fine. I pushed it out of my mind until I heard my grandfather having a conversation about John and his mental illness. My grandfather visited them each year, so he knew a lot more than I did. I then remembered what had happened and tried pushing it out of my head. But after a while I decided to ask my sister if it really did happen, or did I just imagine it? Because I was so young, you know? She told me that it really had happened. She told me that she knew something was a bit different with him. Remember, we were only 12 and 14, we never realized what might have happened or in what mental state he was. We decided not to tell my grandfather or the family, as we don't know what they would do. I just hope we made the right choice. I dread the day I might see him again, but I would rather not think about it. 4. So as far as I can remember, strange things have happened to me. Most times I shrugged it off, convincing myself it's just my imagination. But if you've seen things from my family's point of view, only one word could best describe me. Witch. Something I inherited from my grandmother, whom I will gladly share more about in another story. My earliest memory of paranormal weirdness was my first year in a mobile class. For those of you who are not familiar with them, it is a part of the public schools in the USA, where students are taught in small building hubs outside of the official school building. I remember I needed to go to the bathroom, which was located in the back of the room. I vividly remember walking in and seeing the grey pale legs of a little girl. I knew it wasn't my imagination because I heard her singing to herself in a low voice. I stood in the doorway frozen. I turned back to the class and every other desk was filled. So I quietly walked back to my desk and waited for her to come out. She never did. It seemed like every time I needed to go, she was in there, so I waited. Every day I tried my best to wait, and actually sneaked out to the main building to avoid the bathroom, but after one too many accidents, my mother was at the school demanding an explanation. Soon after, I was given a bathroom buddy and never saw the girl again. My second memory occurred later that year. I was moved into the main building. I was relieved to finally be away from that mobile class, but during our recess something caught my eye mid-game. A building across the courtyard was infested with men dressed all in black, crawling on the building like bugs. I watched some of the men quickly crawl up the walls like spiders, their legs and arms moving unnaturally. It was both fascinating and scary. Some were walking up the side unfazed by laws of gravity. I could not tell if they were using any rope. There were too many to count. They moved so fast and in random patterns. There were a few looking down while others were standing on top, holding what looked like oversized binoculars. At first I thought they were police officers, so I watched obsessively every day. Sometimes I waved to see if they were watching us kids run around the playground. I waited every day for that bell to ring, just so I could see those men run up, around, and down the building. After days of not participating in any games, my then bathroom buddy, who became my then best friend, asked why I liked that old building. I pointed to the policemen crawling on it, but she couldn't see them. In my frustration, I asked the kids around us to look at the building, and before I knew it, there was a load of kids arguing about what they see, much to the annoyance of the teacher. So with that off to detention I go, with a note to my parents. When my mother picked me up from school, we happened to walk by the building. It was empty, completely abandoned. For weeks I could not get the image of the crawling man out of my head, so I convinced myself it was the police using the house for practice. Later, the following summer, my siblings and I were awoken by an infant wailing, while the voice of a woman was attempting to comfort it. We woke up slowly, assuming it was our mother babysitting our baby cousin, who at the time was teething and cried all day. But we soon realized this woman was not our mother. It was past midnight, and there were no infants in our household. We heard more voices and small footsteps of another child run into our room and shout, "They are awake and can hear us!" The woman replied with a "shh" and whispered something too faint to hear. We stood on our bunk beds in a state of confusion and fear. I remember my sister was so scared, she climbed down from her bed to mine and hid under my blanket. She scared the living hell out of me. I stood up all night listening to those noises that carried on until mid-dawn. As soon as sunlight broke, those sounds were gone. I wanted to ask my parents if they heard it, but I knew better than to ask, so it was a bonding moment for us kids. From then on, I pretended not to notice anything. If someone calls my name in an empty house, I made an excuse. If I felt a hard tug on my shirt or hair, I ignored it. I am conditioned to ignore it until it becomes something worth talking about. As if the above isn't enough. This is where the witch label comes in. As an adult, if I put things down, they will disappear. Almost as cliché as it sounds, but if I ask nicely, it is returned in a different visible spot. I often dream of meeting people or being in certain situations before they happen. When a person lies to me, their face morphs. But again, I can convince myself it's all due to body dysmorphia. I try my best to convince myself this is all normal. And many people go through whatever this is, or at least I hope so. 5. My story begins on a late summer afternoon in 2005. A bit of background. I had lived on this block for 7 years prior to this event, and my now husband moved into the house 5 years before. It was a home that had been in my family before I was even born, so I was comfortable enough even though crime had happened from time to time. It was affordable, and only about 5 minutes from the house I had grown up in. I had decided to walk our dog, who would chew things up if he didn't get the exercise. My husband was watching TV, and I decided to walk the dog around the block quickly, as it was warm but needed to be done. It was a usual chore of mine. I had the dog prior to my boyfriend, now husband, moving in. I had only gotten 5 houses down, the street was empty of people. Very few come out of the air conditioning in the Phoenix summer until after dark. A dark mid-90s model car came down the street. It parked about 7 feet from me. It was traveling in the same direction as I was, so it was across the street. The young man inside came across the street straight to me. I was surprised, but not scared. He started speaking quite quickly, saying he thought he recognized me, asking if I was friends with his sister. Didn't I recently graduate from the area's assigned high school? I told him no. Then the high school I had graduated from, and the year, which he seemed surprised at. I believe he thought I was younger, even though I was 26. He looked like he was 19. I knew he could be in his 20s. Some people just don't look it. He had on darker colored clothes with an emo-style haircut. Spoke of things that anyone who went to school here would know. The young man swore I had been friends with his sister. Wasn't I? He gave 2 or 3 common female names to our age range. I said no. I had been holding my leash in my left hand. The dog had been patient. The young man quickly talked. He was making many compliments, then swiftly moved on to suggest we should go out to eat and talk as we had grown up in the same area. He was so awkward. I didn't know who he was, but this was the wrong way to go about getting a date, I thought. Also a creepy way of approaching it. The young man wanted to go out right then, or tonight, which would only have been in a few hours. I think I said something like, "No, I have to walk the dog." He rapidly suggested I just take the dog home, like it wasn't a problem for him. I knew he wasn't going to leave me be, and I had tried to just be polite. Finally told him sorry, I cannot go on a date, and that I was married with a baby on the way. First trimester. I wasn't showing yet. The look on his face was weird. I guess he was preparing to encounter whatever excuses he was expecting. I'm pretty sure that wasn't what he had ever imagined I would say. I had moved the dog's leash a bit, revealing the wedding ring on my left hand. Seeing that I wasn't lying, he stammered, yeah, well, I guess I'll see you around." Young man got into his car and left much faster than he pulled up. I told my husband about the weird event. He suggested that telling him the truth maybe hurt the feelings of a young man just trying to get a date. My husband and I have been friends since we were 15, so we are comfortable talking about anything. At that point it seemed so bizarre. The young man had gotten it all wrong in his approach, if that was the legitimate reason he did what he did. That was my reasoning at the time. Fast forward to about a year later. We had our baby daughter and still lived in the same house. Husband was watching the news when a familiar face flashes on the screen that catches my attention. I had been half watching the TV as well as the baby. Turns out that the young man had asked a 19-year-old college student out. She had told her roommates before the date, and when she didn't return, the police were notified. Awfully, the girl had been assaulted and murdered. The young man denied it. However, her clothes were in his garbage can, and much forensic evidence. He was arrested and was going to trial at that time. I researched what became of the case recently. Now no longer young, this man is sitting on death row. I now know he was 23 at the time he stopped that day. Tragic for the young lady and her family. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 65. Thank you very much to everybody who sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself, then please do send your story over to kingofthecities@gmail.com or kingofthecities@googlemail.com, either or, they'll get to me either way. If you do have a story, all I ask is that you tell me what kind of story it is in the title. It's more convenient for me when you're doing so. I want to thank everybody who sent in questions for the Q&A. I actually recorded it last night. It took a couple hours. I might re-record it, I'm not 100% sure. I was a bit low energy in it, I think. Not sad or anything like that, just overly mellow. I was late at night, or you could say early in the morning when I recorded it. So I might end up doing that again. We'll see. I'll listen over it later as I'm editing, and if I think it's not quite good enough, we'll redo it. So I'm not sure when that's going to be up. I'm hoping within maybe the next week. and it should be pretty lengthy, and I think it'll be longer than the last Q&A. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.